In 2023, the London ultra-low emission zone expanded, already for a second time. From that point on, it covered the whole Greater London, an area of 9 million inhabitants. Some residents welcomed it, some others... not really. These changes triggered protests, and the last expansion sparkled the most spectacular backlash. Some people were even cutting down and stealing cameras used to enforce the rules. So, what is this policy about and why there is such a problem with it? Low emission zone is a tool to cut down emissions in city streets. I mean, emissions from vehicles. It's like a filter, which vehicles can enter freely and which cannot, depending on the city. Polluting vehicles either have to pay to enter or are banned from entering altogether. London is kind enough to let you enter with your old diesel banger, but you will have to pay for that. This makes people think twice about driving into London or about upgrading to a newer banger, which is less dirty. Each expansion made also the air a little better and people a little more angry. So what was the whole story from the beginning? Let's dive a bit into the history, from early tryouts to the latest, greatest expansion. Long before low emission zones, there was something else in London. The Congestion Charge. It was operational from 2003. As the name suggests, its purpose was to reduce number of cars, without thinking about how polluting the vehicle was. It applied only in the very center. When car was entering central London in working hours, driver had to pay. The charge was £5 for driving between 7 am and 6:30 pm, Monday to Friday. The other times, access was for free. Compliance was ensured by automatic cameras reading plate numbers. Since this area was only a small portion from the Greater London, the political risk from this change was small. But of course, before the changes there was a strong opposition, as you might already expect, from motorist groups and conservative parties, who called these measures anti-car and anti-business. The political figure behind this change was Mayor Ken Livingstone, so sometimes you might hear people referring to this congestion charge as the Congestion Charge. Before the changes, majority of people were against them. Many Londoners actually didn't think the congestion pricing could actually reduce congestion, but after the changes the congestion really dropped and support went up significantly. There were twice as many supporters compared to opponents at that point. As it is very common with this kind of restrictions, it did face a strong initial opposition before the launch, but it became more accepted over time as people saw positive results. I mean, the reduced congestion. For many years, the congestion charge was the only fee to enter the city. That changed in 2017 under the rule of Mayor Sadiq Khan. London was breaking EU limits for air quality, so an emergency measure was introduced. And that was the Toxicity Charge, or T-Charge. It was introduced with these banners. If you could see London's air, you would want to clean it too. The T-Charge was a temporary bridge before the real ultra-low emission zone. The goal was to reduce number of polluting cars entering the city center. It was valid in the same area and in same times as the congestion charge, and it was paid on the top of the congestion charge. At that time both charges were valid between 7 am and 6 pm only on workdays. So, how did it work in practice? On Monday morning, London city center, a modern car is entering. It pays only the congestion charge. Then, an old diesel banger is entering. It pays both the congestion charge and the toxicity charge. A polluting car paying the T-charge was defined as a vehicle exceeding Euro 4 limits, which are petrol and diesel cars manufactured before the year 2005. On the other hand, any vehicle entering during the night or through the weekend didn't pay anything. The toxicity charge received mixed reactions, ranging from strong support from health advocates to concerns regarding its impact on low-income drivers. The backlash was limited, since it only affected around 10,000 vehicles daily. While the T-charge was a diluted version of the policy, in 2019 they brought in a full concentrate, the very first ultra low emission zone. It was valid in the same central area. Operating hours were extended to 24/7. More vehicles were affected. Petrol cars limit stayed at Euro 4, but diesel cars limit was extended to Euro 6. That was a bit sketchy because most of diesel cars older than 5 years already had to pay. This is because diesel cars are a bit more polluting concerning nitrogen dioxide and particulate matter, you know. The congestion charge was kept operational during the same hours as before, workdays during the day. This meant entering the city center with an old polluting diesel vehicle during working hours would cost you £24 in total. On the other hand, entering with a modern car during the night or weekend would cost you zero. This change already affected around 60,000 vehicles, but the backlash was still moderate. Only around 17,000 drivers continued to pay for ULEZ every day. The rest either bought a new car or stopped driving. At the peak of pandemic in May 2020, the Transport Secretary Grant Shapps wrote a letter to Sadiq Khan, setting out the terms for financial support for London's transit system. He also asked for an urgent acceleration of proposals for the ULEZ expansion. However, the date for the first expansion had already been set for October 2021. At this point, the policy was extended from the city center to north and south circular roads. Suddenly it affected around 2 million people, but by then most cars were already compliant, around 87%. But that still left around 100,000 vehicles facing a choice: pay the charge, pay for a new car, or stop driving. Because the policy had reached suburban drivers, people who depend more on their cars and often have fewer alternatives, the opposition became more pronounced. As for the congestion charge, that remained in central London. During the pandemic, it was temporarily increased to £15 and extended to operate every day, including weekends, from 7 AM to 10 PM. The 2023 brought the second expansion of the ULEZ, now covering the whole Greater London area. This affected a population of 9 million people. With each expansion, the policy moved further into car-dependent areas, with less comfortable public transport options. Low-income people with older cars suddenly had to pay during a period of high inflation in the UK. You may already feel how the pressure is rising, and now it just exploded. This change triggered the largest backlash of any London road policy in recent years. 3 different kinds of conflict appeared in the same time: political fights, street protests, and infrastructure sabotage. About the political fights, 5 suburban councils, the most distant ones from the city center, thus the most car-dependent, tried to challenge the ULEZ expansion, but the High Court ruled the expansion could proceed. The policy also became a national issue. UK Prime Minister Rishi Sunak said it's not the appropriate time to expand the scheme, as families struggled with cost of living. London Mayor Sadiq Khan said it's essential for public health. Oh, stop. Let's be more specific here. These health concerns were a real thing. There was a tragic death of a 9-year-old girl who lived on a heavily congested ring road. She died in 2013 from an asthma attack, becoming the first person in UK to have the air pollution listed as the official cause of death. 3 years prior to her death, she suffered from multiple seizures and was admitted to hospital around 30 times. She lived on the South Circular Road. The second kind of conflict were the street protests. They were occurring in the most distant boroughs, like Bromley, Bexley or Hillingdon, with sometimes even 200 or 300 participants. The protesters even created a map with locations of ULEZ cameras, so drivers can plan their route to avoid the cameras and avoid paying the charge. Some protesters became famous for dressing up as dinosaurs and standing in front of cameras to block their view, so they couldn't check the vehicle registration numbers. And now the third kind of conflict was the infrastructure sabotage. There was a group who called themselves the Bladerunners. They were physically damaging cameras around the city, cutting cables, spraying over the lens, or even stealing wall cameras. More than 300 cameras were vandalized before the expansion was even launched. So did everyone hate this expansion? The polls showed Londoners were actually split in opinions. 47% were supporting it, while 42% were opposing. More supporters were from the inner city, where ULEZ was already established before, while outer city was rather opposing it. Just after the launch, 60,000 vehicles were paying the daily charge, generating roughly £730,000 per day. By law, this money had to be reinvested into London transport system, including public transport, cycling infrastructure and support for cleaner vehicles. Just to mention, in addition to ULEZ, you may also notice LEZ signs around London. This is a separate scheme introduced back in 2008, which targets heavy vehicles only, such as buses, lorries and trucks. Unlike ULEZ, LEZ was applied to the area of the Greater London already from the beginning. But back to ULEZ, what about people who couldn't afford to upgrade their cars? To address this, London introduced a scrappage scheme. First, it was targeted on low-income households and small businesses. Later on, it was expanded to everyone. A typical car was scraped for £2,000. You could choose if you want to scrape your vehicle for money only, or a combination of cash and 1 or 2 annual public transport passes. Some older vehicles could be also donated to Ukraine instead of being scrapped. Well, but the thing is, this scrappage money cannot be viewed as a replacement cost for a compliant car. It's more like a contribution. Buying a compliant car usually costs several times more. So if you opted for a new car, it was still a burden. And now, finally, you waited long enough. I hear you asking, so was this ULEZ good for something? Or it just pissed half of London population for nothing? Is the air better after all? Or was this just some green propaganda and a tool to get more money from Londoners' pockets? So let's check the numbers. The ULEZ was focusing on reducing NOx and PM particles in the air, which are more directly linked to human health, comparing to CO2, which is more about climate. I have found the official annual report of ULEZ effects from the London City Hall itself, showing the evolution of NO2 concentrations from 2014 to 2024, before and after changes, in multiple locations: central London, inner city, outer city, or even further. The grey graph of the rest of England is a reference how the NO2 is evolving without any ULEZ in place. As you see, it's slowly going down because older cars are naturally being modernized over time. Just to note, the solid line shows emissions along major roads, while the dashed line stands for emissions further away from these roads. The next one to show is the central London graph. Notice the solid red line. The NO2 emissions are going slowly down already before 2017. Then, around Toxicity Charge launch, it starts to go more sharply down, because it sped up process of buying new cars. Then around 2019's introduction of a more strict ULEZ. In the center, the NO2 went down even more sharply. Then there is this strange valley and sudden increase due to COVID restrictions and their lifting up in 2021. So this period is not really conclusive for ULEZ effects. Since then, the NO2 is slowly declining again. The dashed line representing areas further away from major roads shows a rather subtle evolution. Proceeding to inner London graph. That's the area around central London where the first ULEZ expansion took place in 2021. The solid green line is already steeply declining during the T-Charge and ULEZ in the center, probably because some drivers already had to modernize their vehicles before it was required in their neighborhood. Then after 2021 and 2023 ULEZ expansions, the NO2 decline is not so significant anymore, but a kind of visible if you compare it with the grey graph. It's a little steeper in inner London. The other areas like outer London or 5 kilometers away from its borders show some effects during ULEZ expansions when we compare it with the grey graph. But further we go from the center, the less pronounced the effects are. Now, when switching to PM 2.5 concentrations, those are fine particles smaller than 2.5 microns. I mean very small ones. A similar pattern is visible, although these graphs look a bit more messy. After 2017, the downward trend becomes more steeper, particularly when we are closer to central London. Still not too clear how much these pollution changes are related to ULEZ expansions. The comparison graphs might be easier to read. The effect is hugely visible in central London. The solid line stands for real measurements in ULEZ zones, while the dashed line stands for estimations if no ULEZ would be ever established. The overall impact of all ULEZ expansions in the very center is estimated to be around 54% in 2024. But this impact is becoming significant already in 2019, after the first ULEZ was established. As we move from the central London further to inner London, outer London or even further, the difference between NO2 concentrations with and without ULEZ is becoming more subtle. Subtle, but still something. In the inner London, the difference is 29%, in outer London 24%, and even 5 kilometers away from outer London boundary, it's still some 14%. So the effect on air quality was measured to be quite some, being more significant closer to the center and closer to main roads. The result is pretty clear. The pollution went down sharply in central London, and it also went down in suburbs, just not as dramatically. The first ULEZ made the biggest difference. According to official sources, the later expansions still helped, but the effect was much smaller. It's because many of the dirtiest vehicles have already disappeared from the streets before. The modal share? Nah, that changed very little. Most people simply bought newer cars. And what about the traffic congestion or traffic safety? Not much there either. The ULEZ had a small impact there as well, since the overall number of cars stayed similar. Emissions in general? Well, ULEZ targeted only exhaust emissions. The non-exhaust emissions, such as microplastics from tire and road paint wear, remained unchanged. Actually, car traffic is responsible for a large portion of microplastics in the environment. I guess we will hear about them more in the future. And what about concerns from shop owners during the 2023 ULEZ expansion? Oh well, spending in retail looks like it had remained similar before and after changes. So, the whole storyline was like this. Each step of ULEZ expansion was controversial at first, sometimes with protests and certain incidents, like these cutting down cameras. Things got more tense towards the outskirts, where car dependence is higher. A big part of controversy was that it hit low-income drivers the hardest, because they were more likely to own diesel dinosaurs, and they didn't have much money to buy new ones. Over time, the political storm gradually faded. The support for ULEZ rose slightly, from 44% just after the launch to 50% in April 2024, while 31% of people still said no. London Mayor Sadiq Khan was re-elected in May 2024. He became the first person ever to be elected as London Mayor for 3 terms. Congratulations. He defeated his conservative rival, even though opposition to ULEZ was a major issue in campaign. So looks like, although the policy did upset some residents, majority of Londoners still supported him. London's air got a bit cleaner. The question for the next decade is, can we change how we move around entirely without being dependent on cars? Can we make suburbs to work on their own without people needing to travel elsewhere for work? And can we do this in a happier atmosphere? Let's see the future.